G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags. Today we'll be taking a look at the Russians' new Rank 5 battle rating 7.7 premium tank destroyer, the Object 120 Taran. In the early years of the 1960s, the Soviet military came to realise that modern Western tank designs with advanced composite armour had rendered a large number of their current tank designs and weapon systems obsolete. With the Cold War escalating and a real fear of a ground war looming, the Soviets began research on a number of new ammunition types, weapon types and tank designs, one of which was the Object 120 Taran prototype. Now it's worth mentioning right here that the 120 was a failed design. It did not pass its trials and never went into production. Only a single prototype completed in 1965 was ever produced, but before we go into the exact reason as to why, let's have a look at the stats for it here in War Thunder. So firstly, let's get the obvious out of the way. The Object 120 features the largest example of overcompensation in a tank design known to man, the whopping 152mm M96 cannon. This cannon was unique, built specifically for the Taran tank destroyer prototype. Its massive rifled barrel measures in at just over 9 meters long from breech to break, and is the longest cannon of any type ever installed into a fully enclosed tank design. To put the enormous length of this gun into perspective, the mouse is just over 10 meters long in total length. Driven by the explosive force of 14 kilograms of propellant per shot, this cannon is able to deliver 3 ammunition types. The first is an APDS FS shell, weighing in at 12 kilograms and moving at a massive 1,710 meters per second, with a penetration rate of 400mm at 100 meters, 370mm at 1,000 meters, and still managing to penetrate through 340mm of armor at 2,000 meters. The second shell is a 152mm Heat FS shell. This shell weighs 55 kilograms and has a TNT equivalent of 6.46 kilograms, moving at a brisk 1,000 meters per second, and carrying a penetration value of 480mm at all ranges. And last of all is a pretty standard high explosive slug that maintains 960 meters per second with an explosive mass of 5.9 kilograms and comes in with 49mm of penetration at all ranges. Honestly, I don't see the point of taking high explosive shells with this particular gun, especially considering that the TNT equivalent in the explosive shell is actually less than the explosive equivalent in the Heat FS shell, and the Heat FS shell will take out lightly armoured vehicles just as well as the explosive will, while still being far more useful against heavily armoured targets. Of course, the stats only tell half the story. The Taran wasn't designed to brawl at close ranges. It was designed to deliver death to tanks such as the Chieftain at between 2 to 3 kilometers range, and as such, it has one of the best sniper zooms in the game. This combination of a powerful gun and amazing zoom is a sniper's wet dream on the few maps where you can take advantage of the capability. So moving on from the gun, the second thing we need to look at is mobility. The Object 120's hull is just short of 7 meters long and just over 3 meters wide. She stands at just short of 3 meters tall as well and weighs in at 26.8 tons. Now if you think that sounds rather light for a design of this size, you're actually very right, but we'll come to that a little bit later. This low weight means that the Taran's 480 horsepower diesel power plant is able to push this thing around at a listed maximum speed of 64 km per hour on optimal terrain, which in reality on most of War Thunder's terrain is closer to about 50 km an hour or a little over, and up slopes of 41 degrees, which I can confirm, which allows it to easily get into positions to take up sniper fire against the enemy. It's also actually quite nimble and manoeuvrable, surprisingly so for a design this size. So the Object 120 has a great gun, it also has great agility and mobility. So what are its weaknesses? Honestly, everything else. So let's begin with the armour. There is none. Barring a 100mm thick ring around the cannon, the armour on the Object 120 is at maximum 30mm thick, and while angled rather aggressively on the hull, well, it's still only 30mm thick at the front. You can penetrate this thing with a good spud gun if you want it. The sides and rear armour are even worse, with only 15mm and 10mm of armour respectively, at their thickest points. This means that you can kill an Object 120 reliably from the side or rear with a 50 cal machine gun. Remember, this thing rivals some of the largest tanks in the game in terms of size. It's not hard to hit. But the story gets even worse. As you can see, the Taran is a centre rear mount turret design. This means to bring its monster gun to bear around a corner, whether it's a building or a rock, you need to stick over half the length of the virtually unarmoured hull containing the engine out first. An engine that has a near-on 100% chance to be set on fire if it takes a hit. And worse than that, in my experience, most frontal engine hits will also result in the destruction of the turret ring due to spalling, meaning you have a good chance to lose not only your mobility, but also your ability to even defend yourself, should somebody see the nose of your tank starting to creep around the corner. Now, this is not an issue that is unique to the Object 120. Pretty much every single armoured fighting vehicle that has a turret mounted towards the rear has run into this problem. So, the obvious solution to this, as with most designs of this kind, is to back the tank around the corner. By reversing the tank into combat, you'll only expose around a quarter of your tank's hull to get the cannon on target, and as a general rule, most rear-mounted turret designs are empty in the rear of the hull. But not the Object 120. No, the Object 120, behind its 10mm of rear armour, has an ammo rack. An ammo rack that will clear the corner before your gun cannon will be in direct line of fire to all hostile targets. So, having spoken about the hull, let's talk about the turret. The turret on the 120 is not quite the width of the main hull, coming in at around 3 meters at its maximum point, and it still only has 30mm of frontal armour, 15mm to the sides, and 10mm to the rear. Now, the size and design of the turret causes a couple of problems. So the first thing you need to understand is the lack of armour pretty much means that every single time you take a shell to the turret, it's going to disable the gun. Now, this is important to realise because due to the width of the turret, you will need to stick around 1.5 meters of it out of cover before you can even bring your weapon to bear. I have never in my time in War Thunder Ground Forces spent more time fixing a weapon than I have in the Taran, but impressively that isn't actually the biggest problem. As I mentioned, the turret is only 30mm thick, which means at battle rating 7.7, pretty much everything you face will not only be able to penetrate your armour, but penetrate the entire turret from front to back. Why is that a problem? Well, in the back of the turret is a large drum-style ammo rack that is almost the width of the turret itself and cannot be emptied. So, to move around cover and get your gun on the target, you once again have to stick an ammo rack out of cover and in direct line of sight to the enemy's weapon in order to fire a shot. So, with these issues with corners, then the clear choice would be, of course, to get the Taran hull down, hide the hull, and expose as little of the turret as possible. Well, that would be the logical thing to do, but again, there are some issues. The turret on the Taran is almost half the total height of the tank, with the gun mounted in the lower third of the turret, closest to the hull. To bring the weapon to bear over a ridgeline, you will need to be sticking around 0.5 meter of turret, not including the rather noticeable commander's cupola, out of cover. And due to the angle of the turret roof, impacts to it will almost always spall directly into the ammo rack. And if by some miracle it doesn't blow, well, your gun will be disabled again. This is before we even mention the gun depression and elevation. Now, 15 degrees of gun elevation is actually not bad for this kind of a design, but it also only has 5 degrees of gun depression. This low gun depression makes working a ridgeline almost impossible without exposing yourself. Anything more than 5 degrees of rise in the terrain you are parked on will significantly affect your ability to hit targets at any range. And then there are the aircraft problems. From the air, the Taran has a silhouette size comparable to a mouse. This makes it incredibly easy to spot and almost impossible to hide. With armor values so low, virtually any aircraft you can face short of somebody trying to troll in a reserve biplane can pen you from the air with direct fire. Pilots in ground forces matches love this thing, and you will often find yourself getting revenge killed by the very players you just killed with the returning aircraft, because they know they can kill you regardless of what weapons they have. In short, this thing is a deadly death trap. Its gun is powerful to the point of being overkill. With its zoom, it's one of the most fantastic snipers I've had the pleasure to play, but the second the enemy knows where you are and are able to bring guns to bear on you, you are as good as dead. Now, there is just one last thing I want to add to the end here. I have seen some players complain that the Object 120 is hard to kill. It's not. The reason why it sometimes can appear to be difficult to kill is because you're shooting 400mm plus penetration APFSDS shells into something that only has 30mm of armor if you count both the left and right sides. Almost every hit I have survived in the Taran has been from somebody firing a high penetration round at relatively close ranges without aiming for any internal key components, so the shell simply passes through, damages one or two internals, and then exits the vehicle, often to hit other vehicles that are on the other side. Aim at the engine block, aim at the ammo racks, aim at the gun breech, and you'll find this problem just goes away. So, that's the Object 120's performance, but how does it operate as a premium vehicle? Well, in honest truth, very, very, very good. In the course of doing some testing on this vehicle, as well as recording the matches that you've seen running in the background, and just generally playing with the vehicle to get a good feel of it before this review, I managed to unlock 2 rank 5 vehicles with comparative ease. In terms of credit earnings, it's not bad. On a fairly average to poor match, you will still make enough money to cover your repair and ammunition costs, as well as making a little bit on the side. On a comparatively good match, you'll easily be able to bank between 30 and 40,000 credits, quite easily. So regardless of its performance in combat, as a premium vehicle, it does very well. But what about the real Object 120? Is everything I just mentioned why it failed as a prototype? Well, actually no. The prototype failed for 3 reasons, all of them related to the gun, which, as I have said, is one of its redeeming qualities here in game. Firstly, as I've already mentioned several times, the gun is 9 meters long, and unlike in game, in real life, that 9 meter gun will not phase through objects, which means manipulating the gun on a battlefield is actually quite difficult. Small trees, small walls, any kind of debris will block your ability to rotate this gun, which was obviously of a concern. The second issue was gun maintenance. This is a 9 meter long barrel. It is extremely heavy and it's extremely long. Moving the tank around in transit is going to cause that barrel to get jolted around, which could potentially cause the barrel to warp. Also, sustained firing from the gun would heat the barrel up, softening the metal, again potentially causing a warp. Monitoring this was going to be a major issue on a tank with a barrel this long, because it doesn't take too much before the barrel moves beyond tolerances and a shell could potentially jam mid-firing, causing the destruction of the vehicle. But the third and final reason is actually probably the most important one. The reason why the Object 120 Taran failed as a prototype was because it was obsolete before it hit its own trials. As I mentioned at the start of the video, the Soviet Union went into panic mode upon discovering the new Western vehicles, and started producing not just new tank designs, but new weapons and ammunition designs. With the development of the new generation of smoothbore cannons that could deliver the same penetration and accuracy with modern ammunition types on a barrel half the length or less, with half the weight to go with that, the need for such a monster came and went before the Object 120 even entered its trial phase. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you very much for watching. If you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon in the video description down below, and also check out my links to social media and Discord. Remember to click that like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, drive smart, drive safe, and I'll catch you on the battlefield.